I also want to know more about your guys' situation down there, because from the brief description, it sounds pretty crazy.
It is more than crazy. I mean, so maybe we can start with that. Pessoal, eu vou começar, eu vou apresentar a Oana Stanescu. A Oana, a primeira coisa é que ela foi minha professora numa matéria de narrativas e design gráfico, e para mim foi muito legal ver como o modo de pensar é o mesmo. Era uma visão super arquitetônica daquele desenho, da composição que a gente fazia. A Oana, ela é da Romênia, e a gente estava conversando que a Romênia, o romeno e português é parecido, então talvez ela esteja entendendo alguma coisa, não sei, provavelmente não. Mas a Oana, ela... Did you get anything, Oana? No.
Yeah, I actually, yeah.
Então, eu queria agradecer ela por estar aqui. E, assim, muito por cima, ela se formou na Romênia e foi trabalhar em todos os lugares do mundo. Acho que a gente vai falar um pouco disso, e especialmente em Nova York, que é talvez um pedacinho do mundo inteiro. Ela trabalhou com a Nike, com o Virgil Abloh, que acho que todo mundo deve conhecer, com o Kanye West, enfim, com os escritórios do Playlab, do Family, e dá aula na Columbia, no MIT, Cooper Union, Architecture Association, Princeton, SCI-Arc, University of Memphis, University of South Florida, I mean, everywhere, and I think everywhere, and one class at least here in Brazil. I'm changing from Portuguese to English. Desculpa, pessoal. Vai ser doido. E a gente vai ter ela pelo menos por 1 hora no Brasil para conversar um pouco do que é, sei lá, ser arquiteto hoje, ou arquiteta hoje, que é um mundo muito maluco e talvez precise de arquitetos também. Assim. E vocês sabem, escrevem as mensagens no YouTube e podem escrever em português e a gente vai tentar falar em português nas perguntas. So, Oana, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for accepting the invitation. I really realized I was changing in the middle. I don't know how it's gonna. But anyways, and it will be fun if you do the same and you hear some Romanian. I just want to start again, like saying thank you, saying it's a great opportunity to hear different perspectives, and that it means a lot just to explain a bit. I'm finally not teaching anymore in the institutional way after we had some issues, especially related to denying the science, denying that we can do something as professors or as learners. And I'm really happy that I can continue to think and to ask questions. I think more freely on Instagram and YouTube. It's very magical to keep doing this. I'm really happy. So yeah, if you allow me, I will show, like, I will tell one story, and then I'll show a couple slides, and then we can just have a conversation. Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you for having me. At least mentally in Brazil.
Which is the best part. Yeah, just the feeling. not your body here. So this is our 6th class, which I think it's amazing to get so far. And the story I want to tell is very short. It's about, like, the first page in Spheres that Sloterdijk wrote, and he tells the story about this child, this little boy, and he's blowing up like air soap bubbles. And in this one page, Sloterdijk talks about the idea of the kid blowing into, and the act of blowing, or like putting your air inside of something else, like every child plays this game. Of course, there's this relationship with the act of creation, with this God breathing life into this mud that becomes man. Um, but what Sloterdijk tells in the story is that for one moment, in one single like blink of an eye, when the child breathes into the bubble and the child, they become the same. They are part of the same soul, and this bubble exists only when the child has like, is like looking and paying attention to the bubble, and is like aware that the bubble exists. And of course, what happens then, the inevitability of bursting this bubble. And when this bubble just bursts, before like after wandering in space, when it bursts, there's a second of melancholy. So you start to become melancholy or sad, but then in 1 second, as he says, this feeling is replaced again by the feeling of joy of playing. So you burst this bubble, and then you're a bit sad, but then again you blow and you have another bubble, and this continuous act of the joy of play. And then he ends asking one question that I want to read, not chop his story, is that what are broken hopes but opportunities for new attempts? And I think this is very beautiful. I mean, personally, I'm very touched by this one page, the whole book. But so he asked this question like, broken hopes are opportunities for new attempts. And I wanted to start this because when I was rereading, re-watching some of Oana's work and talks, there's a lot of optimism. Like, yeah, um, I think we can maybe talk later. Like you explain in one lecture that you were born into a communist regime, like a dictatorship, and there's one reality going on. And then when you were young, they replace it, and when you replace, like everything changes. And maybe the difference between this your talk on this and our view is that you say, well, it was so bad that it could only get better, right? And for us, I didn't put here, but we had this like a TV clown, maybe 7 8 years ago. He was running for Congress, and he said, he was like literally a clown, and he said, it's so worse that it can get worse. Like it's so bad it can get worse. And in a way, like that was the best time we had, and now it's only getting worse and worse every day. So maybe we have these two possibilities of it's so bad that, I don't know, you get better or you get worse. It can always go this way. So this is Peter Sloterdijk, for who wants to read like 3,000 pages. and this is I stole this screenshot from from Oana's talk about the project ambition is the exploration of the universally human through the tremble at the heart of our existence, the breath. And so the breath becomes super important. Of course, it connects super literally to the page I read. But there's one word here that I liked a lot. Is like, I don't know if you consciously read Sloterdijk to write this, or it's just a coincidence, but you say tremble. And it's the same word that Sloterdijk also uses, that when the child blows and the bubble trembles in the air. So I think it's very interesting that tremble is not set in, it's not like a stone. It's and then we go for like more literal things. Since this is a theory class, right, in a lot of quotes, I want to talk about ant farm, especially their projects related to end of the world, right? So they have this in the end of the 60s and the 70s, all the ecological, the doom views that the world's gonna end, and we need to like clean ourselves to breathe clean air. So they develop these inflatables where you can, like, if you're inside, you're in this bubble of clean, nice, survivable space, and outside you have to wear masks because the world is ending. And it means that not only form has to change, but also like behavior and maybe traditions. And I think if you look these as limits or boundaries, and farm never had any boundary. They don't. I don't know if they are designers or architects or lecturers or just drawing, or humans or dolphins, which is super weird. So there's no really way to put boundaries in what they're doing. And to me, the most important work that they did is actually this book. They made this like zine, this super like cheap book to tell people how to build these bubbles, build these inflatables. This book's called Inflato Cookbook from 1971, and they have like all the, how you think on the geometry, how you think on the air, the pressure, the gluing things. So the whole idea is not to be someone important, but to collaborate and to spread knowledge and to do things that other people can share. And I think this book, it's maybe the biggest contribution, because we see like every day new bubbles are being made by students. We did one in school, using this as a starting point from someone that learned. And one that really talks about the role of being an artist or an architect for us is this project called Media Burn, where they got like all these TVs in the car, which are like the two most important symbols of the United States culture, and they just run each other, burn everything in a crash. And I think talking about media is again important because I mean, I'm just touching points here, but we can learn and we can use this as at our favor, instead of being like, yeah, there's one channel, you watch it and you're like brainwashed by whatever TV is telling us. And I think more than anyone, Oana knows how to employ some techniques or strategies to do like interesting things, especially because I feel like Farm use these projects as celebration. It's never like a bad thing or sad, or I'm not burning TVs like ludist, but it's like, yeah, let's burn TVs and let's do something else and put a smile and go on. This is probably where I try to connect with the work. I think everybody knows this project even here. It's called Plus Pool. It's a pool shaped like plus sign in New York. And that's pretty much it, which is amazing when you can explain a project with almost one word. You can just use like a mathematical symbol. And the whole idea is like, yeah, why don't we use this? You know, we don't need to build anything. We just like make this little wall that filtrates and cleans the water of the river, and then we can go and swim. And I feel like what is interesting is that this project, nobody, as I know, nobody asked for, but you put the project, and then you made a website, and then you sent to people, and then you start like knocking at doors, and people realize that, yeah, uh, why not? And then we have this pool, or almost we will have at some point. Um, and this is really using media to understand, and the conversation to understand how we can make better things. I feel like the plus is not really, well, it's not super relevant to our work, or like a form was to some time ago. But like, yeah, what will happen once we have this, right? What, like, children will play and people will see, and maybe nature will be better than uh, these modern skyscrapers. So it's like, yeah, but what will happen after, when this bubble is thrown in the air, wandering? It's not about the bubble.
Mhm.
And I feel like maybe this is, if I'm right, with 2014 Off-White, it's like, it's a clothes store. That's it. It's like a place where you hang new clothes to buy. But again, there's like, it's one line, and you have nature, and you have something completely different. uh, and I think this is so generous, so interesting. Like, yeah, maybe I don't have money to buy new clothes, but I can sit there and have I don't know, like an ice cream or something. I don't know if you can do that, or it will be interesting to see people doing that, and then the security as representing power comes and throw you away. But maybe that's the limit of architecture, right? We can imply that people can have an ice cream, and let the security guards to throw us out. I don't know. And the last one, um, my bad, it was Oana and forgot the name.
Akane Moriyama.
Moriyama, yeah, just an artist. They work on this project for MoMA PS1 that, I love the name, is like serious fun, which is pretty much, again, like nothing. It's just a little roof made of fabric, and then these toys, or this, I don't know how you call it, like these like geometrical, beautiful things, and then that's it. And all the work that can happen is made by people like trying to learn and to understand, and to make sense of what's going on, because maybe this weirdness in shapes and expectations can make something more interesting, more discoverable. And again, I remember Isamu Noguchi, when he made these playgrounds for children, and was all about like, yeah, let's just make some mountains and some holes and some bars, and we don't need to tell children what to do or how to play, because they figure out. And I think these ideas are very interesting to me, and I want to, if you agree, talk about this, to like, how can we not do anything, how can we not make much, and still like have weird uh, things happening later, and weirdness might be good.
Mhm.
uh, and just the last one, which again goes to this idea of not doing anything, is you're quoting Marcel Duchamp in the lecture, that he just say, yeah, I'm a breather, a respirator. Isn't that enough? Like, I mean, what else can I do, a part of keep breathing, and everything else is just everything else, and we see how it goes. So that's my remarks. I don't know if a lot makes sense or not, but Oana, if you wanna say something, if it makes sense.
Yeah,
to
no, I
share.
find, I mean, it's always nice to look at the ant farm work is just so sweet, and um, it's just fun. And you know, I kind of miss some of that. I feel a lot of us are missing some of that, just the kind of spirit of just doing stupid things in a way. I mean, the world is in a serious place for a good reason, but anyway, just briefly want to mention all the collaborators on the different projects. Off-White was done as family. Plus Pool is together with Dongping Wong, Archie Lee Coates, and Jeffrey Franklin. And then the PS1 one was together with Akane Moriyama. Yeah, I don't know where to start. Should we start with the fun or lack thereof?
Yeah, maybe we go from fun to serious.
Well, I think, you know, the PS1 one was called Seriously Fun, and it was right an invited competition for this for the warm-up series, these concert series that they're having every weekend in the courtyard of PS1. And it's incredible how nostalgic I sound when I say that, or it just makes me think of, wow, parties in courtyards. For New York, it was those were such a reflection of youth too. It's the place where you go and feel instantly old because everyone is so incredibly young and hip and new and fresh energy. It's kind of just beautiful. So now that we're talking about that, it just makes me think how much we're missing that, an understanding of people, not as Instagram accounts or like the loose people that you kind of see, but when, you know what I mean, the feeling of a crowd together, and how much that gives that gives one an understanding of the world around us versus the way we relate right now just as individuals. I don't know if that makes sense. But I didn't think about that in a second. So anyway, with that, the idea was just I feel I'm always at the end of the day intrigued. I think the most interest, the most serious projects, the most everything, it still needs a little bit of sense of humor. I think as species, we can't take ourselves too seriously, and or we self-destruct. And I think that's what's happening right now. And truly, if we were to take ourselves less seriously and maybe just take yeah, the take stock of the simple things a little bit more. Can you couldn't we be just having, like, you know, couldn't the world just be a bit slightly better place? I mean, I know it sounds so incredibly cliche, but in a way, right, like the it's always the simple things that matter ultimately. And I think, and I don't know if that's what we were saying, Thiago, but I feel some of the things that we sometimes have a hard time reconciling. We're trained as architects to build, right, and bake and build and make things, but oftentimes that's not the answer. And or can you build, depending on context and everything, where something that is more alive, or something that responds to its world. There's so much intrigue in that. And now doing some projects with the justice system at MIT, and there too, everyone is stuck in these 50-year-old buildings that were kind of oblivious by the time they were built already, because it takes like 10 to 20 years to build a courthouse. And then 50 years later, it's just something that you're stuck with, that's expensive and that you can't make use of. So our constant question right now is like, how can you build towards a changing future, right? And I'm going to stop ranting because I think I'm just rambling. But I think this is a question this is something that's been on my mind a lot, especially this last year, where we see how clearly our cultural values have been changing, if only because we're able to come together and we can kind of agree, okay, this is messed up. We don't need to accept this, whether it's violence of any form, or injustices, or abuses of any other form. And I think that's really there's power in that, in the fact that we recognize it in each other, in different societies, in different places. And right, like we look at movies from the 70s, or we look at things in the past, and you're like, ooh, how does he get away with slapping women in that movie and stuff like that? And you're just like, what were people thinking? That was entertainment, right? And but it's something fascinating that within such a short time span, you realize everything looks, tastes slightly differently. So then how do we position ourselves as architects towards that, right? Like, how do we build something that's supposed to be lasting without trying to fix something that isn't necessarily fixable? I don't know where I'm going with any of this.
Yeah, like hearing you say that, I think there's like two times or two mindsets that we use when you're designing. They're like, I used to say this with the students, and it comes from OMA in a sense, or this idea of architecture that you need to have two different people in the office. Like the first one is very stupid and has no idea what he's doing, which are the interns, of course. And then you have like the super smart guy that knows how to pick and to keep things going. And I feel like when you say, oh yeah, we need to build, we need to put bricks and all these things because it's important, a building is important. It's like architecture made only from one guy, from the super smart guy that knows how to build and how to have like how much it will cost and everything. Because in a way we're like suppressing or how to say, drowning our child that is blowing bubbles. I feel like when you're designing, usually we are meant to like forget that we're a child blowing bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And then like because everybody likes, you make this first model like, yeah, it's so cool, and then the professor comes and say, yeah, but how are we gonna stand up? And then okay, I'm gonna be a modernist now, so you make a box and it's white. And maybe we are taking this too far, and like the optimism I was thinking when I was putting this together is like, yeah, no, shut up, smart guy, you just be quiet, because we don't need smartness, but we need like nothing, just fun, just like clear mind, and in a way like the toys that the Eames made, like, yeah, they're nothing, I don't know, it's super weird. And I feel like, or if you share the feeling that at the older we get, or like the more experience we get, we want to be like happy, and then we can't, like, no, you shouldn't be happy, you should pay bills, and you should like put in a grid and fix everything. Like how can we continue doing this, right? How, like, you're gonna sit in your desk and just make like Excel sheets of how much it's gonna cost? Is there a way to not be, or I will use one of your words, like, is there a way to not be productive, to avoid productivity?
I was listening yesterday. So one thing I do have to say, I wouldn't call interns stupid. And just aside, I know you didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
But I think there's something interesting there in the fact that I always find that people who don't know how to do my first boss, Ares, he also always used to say, first time you're doing something, you're doing it best because you don't think you know how to do it yet, right? So after, with experience and whatever, what you call the smart guy becomes the person replicating things and so on and so forth. And I was reading my friend Emily Siegel's book, and she has a quote in the beginning, and it says, experience is a hoax. And it really stayed with me because I think, especially now during Corona and everything, we see it that experience isn't necessarily always for the better, or that truly it is a hoax of right. It's something we're mythologizing. I think this notion of play, I was looking at it specifically during Seriously Fun and kind of investigating it and looking at Homo Ludens, John Huizinga's book. And one thing that, like, for me, it's the premise is really basic and kind of obvious. Like, play is something that is kind of evolutionary. It's part of all mammals. And the more intelligent the mammal, the more it plays. And it's something that just can't be explained from an evolutionary standpoint, like why that happens, because it implies taking risks, it's dangerous, and it uses energy. So it doesn't make any sense. Yet it's there in us. Like you can't even control it. Or and I always just wondered, why don't we take that more seriously instead of work and productivity? Like why, just as a kind of humanity, like why did we go down that path of, I don't know, whatever, building things endlessly, instead of really just saying, actually, at least not 8 hours a day, okay, fine, 4 hours a day you play. So why isn't that integrated? Like why aren't we thinking of ourselves in those terms? When did we become these sort of, and now you go to work? And I think that's something I have trouble with, because I had to write something about work and offices the other day, and it reminded me, growing up in Romania during communism, the Romanian version, I guess, of communism, you would see your parents have 8 to 12 hour long jobs, but they were without any options. You couldn't leave, you couldn't change your job, you depended on your boss. No matter what, you'd still work for the state. So you had no options, and you were stuck in this job. And it was also, it wasn't rewarding, it wasn't getting you anywhere. And I think as a child, I realized I realize now, it's the only moment where I saw how the system is disenfranchising my own parents, like how it leaves them powerless, right? It's the only moment where I as a child interact with the system is, well, why are my parents home or whatever? And I think because of that, I always had an aversion towards what I call, this is going to sound terrible, but like growing up and becoming, like being in that position, I just associated so deeply, viscerally with that, with how I was seeing my parents being disenfranchised at that time. Um, and because of that, I think I felt that the moment you don't live in a place like that, the moment you do have options, you almost have a responsibility to pursue them or to try to make the most of them. And because the world around you is always trying to kind of put everyone in boxes and so on and so forth. But I feel on my end, I know I'm constantly just need to find ways to keep playing, or to just explore things, or to keep myself awake and alive in many ways, and not kind of become subsumed by a machine, the machine, so on and so forth. And you know, in a way, it's trying to claim a freedom that my parents didn't have, and that I'm supposed to be supposed to be having. But I will say, going from that world to the Western world and seeing that the same sort of thing was happening, but by choice, like the same sort of marrying to the desk and the computer, and kind of the same sort of commitment, but by choice, not by, you know, in one place you didn't have an option, this was by choice. It was very, I think, strange and confusing to me, because it just begs the question, well, what is this all for? Or what is all this progress for if it just comes down to, yeah, just complaining about work right now.
Which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, but I think they're like goals, right? You set, or I will not say, I will ask, when you start doing something, how do you set your goals, right? Do you want to make something nice, something playful, something beautiful, or you want to make something and whatever happens is, you know, like, enjoy the journey? Or this is also like, yeah, no, I'm not that innocent, and the drawing has to be beautiful in the end, the house needs to be like standing. And
Well, I guess there's, of course, two sides to this. On the one hand, there's the poetic and kind of the wishfulness, and on the other hand, there's the reality in a way of architecture. And they're not necessarily pulling in different directions. I think there's beauty in both. So what I mean with that, in let's say the poetic, the goals for me, it's, you know, anyone who's done anything creatively, whether it was writing a sentence or building a model or doing anything, you have that moment where you kind of just no, where you just love the thing you've done, where you're like, okay, this is awesome, right? When the pieces kind of fall into place and you're like, sweet, this is it. I mean, I think any act of creation is just chasing that. And that is a combination of, you want it, from my perspective, you want it to work, you want it to have a certain sensibility, a certain effect, a certain expression. So it's a combination. It's not separating, beauty from how it reads from what it does. I think in architecture, we're very much tied to what things do. And I'm still kind of fairly uncomfortable with things that don't do things. um, so I think the goals are there and multiple, but really it's trying to, honestly, in many ways, I think it's just trying to surprise myself or to discover something new in the process. Because at every project at the beginning, you're like, you have an intuition, you have an inkling of like of where it could go. And I know in mind, I usually don't want it to end up just there, right? Like in a way, the process of spending time or research or of designing should reveal something new, something unexpected. And sometimes that's something more basic or something simple. I want to make clear too here that I'm not arguing for constant reinvention of the wheel or anything. Like it could be that surprise lies in the most basic of forms or shapes or anything. Um, but it's that desire to just, I mean, I think the honestly, I find the creative process makes me make sense of the world, makes me understand the world. It's a little bit like writers write to, supposedly, to make sense of the world. I feel for us, it's like, for me, it's like building to do the same thing, or creating, or like drawing, making plans, and doing things, because in essence, you're taking an issue that is seemingly obvious, and you have to turn it, it's like a Rubik's cube, and you have to turn it around and around and around and around, and then comes code, and then comes budget, and then comes whatever, and you keep messing with these things until you get it where you want it to, right? And kind of that's the play, and that's the game. And where I think you have to suspend disbelief in that moment. Like you need to kind of give it the benefit of the doubt and just say, hey, let's just see where this goes. Because if on day one I say this is what it is, then you're kind of killing it. I realized in many conversations with students that I and like draw analogies between games and design. So games happen always within fixed parameters, right? Whether it's not stepping on a certain line, or whether it's throwing the dice, or there's a kind of set of rules, however loose one interprets them, to which one is playing. And without rules, you don't really have a game, right? Even if it's the most basic hopscotch or whatever. I find design is the same way, where you are negotiating something between set of parameters. And some are given and some are fixed, but others we are fixing. And I think that's what's crucial to me always, like, how do I make sure I'm not kind of fixing things that actually could be reconsidered, could be turned upside down, could be challenged. Um, so that's how I approach it. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel there was something else on my mind that I was gonna answer that you said, but now I lost my train of thought.
I, what I think's fascinating is that when you're explaining, like, yeah, I want to do, or like, it's a very personal thing, and like designing as making a building to know yourself or to know how you think. And I don't know if just my sense that we not allow ourselves to do this. We always find excuses to rationalize. So there's Philip Johnson has this text, like the seven crutches, and he says, yeah, you use, like, that's what the client wanted, or that's what the regulations asked for, and we forget that we are designers or architects, and we always talk about the other, the world, the building, the brick, the whatever, and like avoiding personality. And when I see, for example, when I talk to designers, or when we go to like a furniture designer lecture, it's never about the furniture. The lecture is oh, so I did this and I had this idea, and then I got the wood and I did that. And they are not like shy of saying, yeah, this is me. I am the one that is like doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this maybe is like the biggest difference for me when we like the narrative of being an architect or
Mm-hmm.
another designer. And just like going back to the bubble boy, which is this image, I cannot take it out now, but um, I think you can outsource architecture.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask someone to do like you do the model and you do the drawing and you think and you make the calculations. It's a very outsourceable thing. You can have another one like doing almost the same thing for you, but you cannot outsource games or playing, right? It does. No one can. Ah, yeah, go play, and I'll sit here and I watch you play, and then I have fun. It's like no, you are the one that needs to be like stepping on the line or trying to fake it or trying to find ways to not follow the rules, which I think are like the basic rule of gaming or like playing is try to break the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know because it is kind of this paradox. Like you, I forgot or I didn't know like how to put all the names of people that work in the project. And the first thing you did is like, yeah, I work this with these people and the other guys and you tell everybody's names, but then you still feel or I'm putting words in your mouth now, but you feel like, yeah, it's my design. I did it. There's some component of who I was at that moment. And and it's like it's very personal. It's personal by a collective, not
Mm-hmm.
individually, but uh, and maybe you are doing or you can be super personal by being uh, like open and giving to people and saying, yeah, that's not about the beauty. It's yeah, I did this for you. It's very open. Do whatever you want or you can. And the paradox is that like you have all this discourse that people know I'm not doing anything. I'm just the architect. I'm just like putting bricks the most intelligent way. But then yeah, but it's your brick you chose and you're just faking that you don't care. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. It feels like how I say it, um, hypocrisy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the this idea of yeah, I did because I'm part of something and I'm doing, um, which I
Sorry.
don't know. No, I'm just like now I am processing it like as a professor, for example. It's always that's what we do. Maybe as a professor, we try to find these boxes to put the students or something, and then which I think is important. But then in the end, like yeah, no, I'm sorry to shape you. You know, but how
Mm-hmm.
you would not shape someone, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You keep this hypocrisy weird.
Well, I think there's a few different things. And like one, when it comes to ownership and for working in a collective and so on and so forth, I think, I mean, there's a few things, and I also don't want to hypocritically paint it as easy or pink or everyone's happy. Like I think that reality is in something as challenging as, let's say, built architecture or traditional form, someone is responsible, someone does need to assume their responsibility. So there is a sequence, but I think from there there's also just a kind of the desire to just respect the people that you work with, and have give they thrive the same like me. Everyone thrives if they have skin in the game, if they have something to if they feel respected and invested in a way. And I think that's the goal ultimately, because you want the best of the people that you work with too. So I wonder if we can just give up the, I think to me the kind of, it's the fundamentals on which we operate that are our restrictions. It's not so much um It's not so much the, let's say, like the whatever client, the economy, the whatever. We can always have someone or something to blame, but I think it's more the fundaments. And what I mean with fundaments is the fundament of ownership over an idea, or that one is an author of an idea, or that the idea would be original in the first place and that's never been done before, or like there's all these assumptions that if you let go of them, at least to certain degrees, and again, if you set the parameters to your game right, so if you really question, like, is that of value to me or not, is that of value to me or not, which aspect is of value to me, I think that allows you to think differently of what one does. In your comparison with the artist or the furniture maker, on the one hand, the reflex is, of course, to say architecture is different than furniture or art because it's inhabitable, it has function, it has things to respond to. But the other thing that I think is oftentimes misleading is in this conversation is how we define architecture. Because I think for many people, it's this sort of very fixed thing, like either a building or a very physical thing, or yeah, a very precise thing. And if you basically, I don't think that's the only way in which architecture manifests itself. So this notion of, can things be personal, is creation anything but personal, to me has to do just with how we just think of architecture altogether. So maybe it's, and how we think of architecture, but that has to do also with how we think of quote unquote success. So if we equate, as we do traditionally, architecture, like success in architecture, with the bigger the better, the bigger the building, the more buildings, the more you build, that success, that's something that I can tell you I currently am not super interested in. And it took me a long time to understand that, or to even just acknowledge, it's like, I just don't, I things will happen at one point, but there's a step, there's a way to get there. But what I'm trying to say is, I can do other things too. And yes, I'm building a house right now, but it's basically, it's, I think, this notion of quote unquote success, or what we defined as the architect, that I think each of and every us needs to challenge on our own. And see how much we're subsumed to it, or how much we can change what it means, or just define what it means. I think we tend to operate a little bit like in the dark, right? We take it as a given. The architect is this, and he needs to build a lot. And I mean, you guys have Niemeyer, so I'm sure that's a lot to live up to. So then everyone is like, how do I get to that place where I build cities from scratch? And it's like, it's just not going to happen again. But more importantly, I think the first thing we have to do, and that's our responsibility towards ourselves, is just define what success means to ourselves, more so than what even maybe than architecture means. So just kind of, how do I want to spend my time? Where do I want to get to? What are the things that are important to me? Because it might be that it's more so the time you spend together with people in the process, and the joy of the process, and the joy of building things too. But it might be, the value might lie a lot more in the front end than the back end of, and here's the building. You know what I mean? So I think architecture is not a singular thing, and I'm not saying that with the desire to say this is architecture, like to fix it in any particular way, but on the contrary, to kind of just embrace it as like an pretty vast skill set that we each reflect, or like operate with or use in different ways, and that can take you different places. And buildings are not the only way, they could be, but again, if we think more so about where the value lies for us, I think that could lead ultimately to more interesting buildings, more interesting projects, to more interesting outcomes. But if everything is driven by, this is what architecture is and how do I get there, then we're always going to just kill ourselves in the process and beat ourselves up because we're not this enough, not that enough, not whatever enough to get there, to become Niemeyer or whoever. But instead, can you reverse it? Can it start with, how do I want to spend my time? What do I actually want to do? what actually brings joy, which sounds banal as hell, but I don't know why that's I don't know why that's banal. Like in a way that should be it.
Yeah, I had a professor, like I had one crisis when, or what, I had a billion crises as a student beginning career, and we built this building, and it was nice in the end, but I knew it was my on my way home, and I knew every day that it was wrong. Like, oh, they built it wrong here, and this is not how we design, and I kept this like a lot, like going crazy of, oh my God, so many mistakes. And then my professor said, um, architecture is like, it's making architecture as a verb. It's like, it's making. So what you do is you make it in time, and then that's it. And then there's the building. And then if the building is like it is or is different, that's life. But making architecture as a time, I think this is was really important to me to hear that. And I feel like it's closer to what you're saying. Like, okay, so if I'm going to spend my whole life making architecture, I probably should worry less about the building and more about the idea of making, and why I'm making this, why I'm starting from here, why I'm not like talking to these people, or I'm worried, like I said, like I'm worried that I stole this idea. Yes, of course, probably everybody steals, and it's super good. And well, if it's fine in the end, that's cool.
Mhm.
But this I find interesting, and that was like my whole point in talking to you, that try to make it more personal. Like, yes, I am part of this thing, and I'm doing it, and my project is making architecture, not like building a lot of buildings. Like, yeah, I'm successful because I have like a
Mhm.
thousand houses done, which I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not buying that it's ever not personal. I think one doesn't receive an invitation to think of it maybe in those terms. But I'm not the same way with I'm not buying that there is neutrality and there is objectivity without context. I mean, it's nothing is that, let's say, pure in any way. And so I think no matter what the moment you create, it does come from you one way or another. But I think it has more to do with just how we think of it. And I wanted to say one thing, and it really slipped my mind when you were talking about making architecture. Oh yeah, I think for me, architecture, for better or worse, it's what I've been doing the longest, what I know how to do best, or kind of. um so for me, architecture is just an excuse, and it's an excuse to knock on doors, to have conversations with people, to visit places, to uh, build, to it. Even the built object is an excuse. I feel, to me, that it's never about the built object in itself, but it's about what it facilitates, right? I always think of it as infrastructure to life. Ultimately, it's there to serve and to hold lives in one way or another. So that's how I'm thinking of it. In itself, it's not the objective architecture for me. It can't be. I think that's problematic to me. But it's really an excuse which enables me to kind of, let's say, organize or kind of think through life around that. And because for better or worse, that's the only thing that's the only thing I know how to do. But it's not about itself.
I There's one question here that I think I will like keep the thinking. I will ask in Portuguese and then you see. Uh, Você considera que trabalhar de maneira colaborativa é parte necessária para ter o melhor resultado? E essa sempre foi a sua visão, mesmo trabalhando em escritórios que a atmosfera era competitiva?
I understood the first part. If working collaboratively is a part, but then literally the last half I missed.
So do you think, or do you consider working collaborative is necessary to have a better result? And if this was always your point of view, even when you work in offices, or that the atmosphere was very competitive.
Um, Better, I think it depends on what you mean with better. So for my own, the way I look at the world, better, yes. uh, but I think, again, it comes back to just how you consider architecture, what you see as values, because for someone else, better might just mean a forceful kind of whatever, just a very different take on things. So for me, um, yes, it absolutely better, more brains leads to better and more interesting things. Also, because I'm just not attached to the thing in itself, and I feel that's something that's organic and can evolve. And to the office question, so I think what blew my mind is actually, and it was the most pivotal moment in my life, is working at Rex, because up until then I was in school, and here was a place where we would sit. It was, it had just turned from OMA into Rex. It was a very young office, very flat. So we were all sit at the tables. I was still a student with junior architects, with senior architects, with the bosses. We'd put things on the table and discuss them. So it was the first time when I learned to work collaboratively, because the reality of the profession is just collaborative. And because, we all had skin in the game. We wanted that thing that we would put out to be as good as possible, because it would have all of us in it. And that blew my mind, because school had been so much about what's your project and what's your project and what's your project. And I felt it so incredibly liberating to be working with people, and to be, the joy of kind of aligning ideas and being excited about an idea with someone, or kind of going through the struggle and having these conversations and then getting ideas. And I mean, that's just so much fun, and there's so much value in that to me. And but it's also liberating, because you're not all of a sudden this illusion of that the pressure that one is under to fulfill all aspects of architecture on their own, the way we're kind of taught in school at times, or kind of led to believe in school sometimes. I mean, that's, nobody can do that. Literally nobody did do that in the past, and it's never been that kind of a singular thing. And yes, you can have, again, someone who can drive the car and define things, but you still work with people, and you still um react to people, and there's still this kind of constant influence and kind of back and forth. And I find that beautiful, and I just don't see the need or the point on insisting on one's own territory, or this is mine or this is yours. I think that happens organically. Of course, we come up with ideas and we discuss them and so on and so forth. And, but denying all of that, I just don't see why. Right? Like, why one would deny that, the way it so often happens in architecture. If you think of the amount of people that work on a project, the fact that nobody's is insane in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and Guilherme asked, do you believe pop culture gave you space to be more disruptive in terms of design and creativity? And I think it's interesting, like pop culture, because if we look, like if we Google you, I don't know if you did this, probably it's super like, probably like most interviews and most, it's all relating to pop culture. Like, yeah, you're in New York Times, in the like all these websites and magazines, and like people read New York Times, not architects. Um, and like, do you think this frees you to do different things, or allows you to do different things that you already want to do? Uh, And I guess you see this as a good thing, or not talking to architects in a...
I think however people want to frame my work, I'm not, I think it's something that I probably benefited off, the kind of, let's say, pop culture, whatever. um, but it's not something that I'm, let's say, have a grand master plan or kind of even like pursue in any specific way, except for in a rather organic, natural way, right? Like in a way, I'm just it's not something I pursued as a, like one would pursue and have academic pursuits. Like I'm going to kind of break this boundary or whatever. But I think it's more of a reflection of our generation and just having a different way of operating. And the fact that I was working in the States, but, or I worked in many places around the world and then in the States too, but I wasn't from there. And my infrastructure wasn't an architectural infrastructure around me. My connections were actually people who were in music, art, writing, other worlds. So it wasn't, and to me that's also the power of architecture. You don't depend on the architecture world, right? You can actually build, so on and so forth, without, it's not like music industry and other places like that where you have to go, or fashion or things like that, where you very much have to be part of that world. But architecture, you just need someone to bounce, someone to build that thing with or something like that. So and I think that's really nice. So so all of this to say that I also don't, I do take issue with, architecture being so special that you need to read 10 books to understand it. Like, do you know that kind of arrogance that architecture can come with, or the fact that everyone understands architecture because everyone lives in it. They're just being led to believe that their opinions don't matter, or that their opinions don't, that architecture is a lecture and that there's something that they don't have a say in, and so on and so forth. But everyone has strong reactions to it. I mean, we lived inside for a year now, and there's we know every corner of our rooms or spaces probably, right? And we know what it means to discover in a city a place that is nice and you're just enjoying, and so on and so forth. So all of this to say that I don't see how you can, I think good architecture, things that work, they work at any level, and you can explain, you might not even need to explain them in any fashion whatsoever. They kind of just do their work. I think that's where we were extremely lucky with the pool. I mean, I've never seen a reaction like that to a piece of design or architecture, and to see people just kind of seeing it, getting it, and kind of, putting their energy behind it, was like, wow, I've never believed that much, I think, in the power of design. I'm not saying that to applaud myself, but that was just really, or us, the whole team, but it was really just us learning that through the public reaction. It's like, damn, people really want things or know things, or I mean, it's there was an agency in that which was really nice, and it just makes me think how much more room there is for that. um yeah, I don't know if that quite answers the question.
Yeah, like you said, there's an agency, that's maybe the expected thing that people, like real people, not architects, want. And maybe we always looking for like the pool, and we talk about the pool and the plus and why it's here and not in like half a meter, and why it's this thick. But then like the agency, that's what the New York Times want to talk about, right? Like, yeah, whatever color, but why, how's it gonna happen? Like
But
the
I think we all, this last year, I think we all must have had such strong reactions to what, and kind of mirror mirror reflections of what we read, and how media has its own sort of, whatever media is, but how much how big the impact of what you read, but also understanding that what you read is also just, it's just another industry, it's just another game. And because all our information, especially early lockdown, was so depending on either your Instagram bubble or your news bubble. And it's weird because I feel now I'm in Europe, I feel the kind of, let's say, Instagram heat bubbles versus news bubble. It's weird because I don't know exactly where you can find necessarily news, like, right, like in, let's say, good news. They're really hard to combine. And you kind of try to pick for different places in different places in different areas. So all of that to say that, on our end, people also just want to write about stuff that everyone will click on. So, for years we have never talked about the work with Kanye and so on and so forth, because whenever you say that word, it's going to be an explosion. Everyone has already opinion and they just want to roll with it. Like, it's not an actual conversation. It doesn't do any good to anyone in any form and shape or anything. And to this day, like, chances are, if anyone writes anything on me, that there's going to be something written about either of them. And I get it too, because I think for them, for I guess the non-architects, or for people, you want to show someone's, I guess, like achievements, or not, like something like that, and that's the kind of most direct currency in which you can do it, right? Name dropping. But I think when it comes, in many ways, it's also a bit of a sad way of conversing. Uh,
Like settling, I mean, people will talk to you because they are safe. You will do exactly the same thing again, right? That's like the idea of having an experience comes, right? I'm safe that you will be able to do what I asked. And maybe that's not the fun part. Like, yeah, but how much risk are we gonna do? How different things we can get.
I would put it a little bit differently. I do think, especially in the begin, or like at certain moments, like, people do come with, and they want you to do not what they ask, but what they've seen you do for someone else. And they don't understand that that only works because that person was able to assume risks and have a vision. So for example, at the Hong Kong store, it needed to tell a client to give up a third of their floor space, where, like, selling floor space, retail workspace, floor area, sorry, to give that up to make a garden is insane. Everyone would tell you you're crazy, get out of here. But he got it. He knew it. Like, his brain works that way. It's like, this isn't about how much clothing can I get per square footage, but it's about trying to do something differently. And that's the only reason why we were basically able to push the front door back by, I don't know how many, I'm gonna say 10 meters or whatever. It's not 10 meters, but we were able to push the front door back and say, okay, this is a front yard now. And that was only possible because he was able to understand it and to run with it, right? But it's the same with people. Always come when people say, I want the Apple store of this, the Apple store of pharmacies, the Apple store of this, the Apple store of that. They missed the very point that when the Apple store happened, everyone thought Steve Jobs was crazy and that the whole company was crazy and it was going to fail. And it was extremely risky, but also forward, like, it was visionary. So everyone wants the success, but no one wants to assume the risks. And I think that happens a lot. So that's when you get stereotyped, or it becomes very quickly. That's why, to me, it all comes down less about what even the project is than who you have the conversation with. Like, who, if you're not on a similar wavelength with a client, and if you say blue and they understand red or whatever, then it's just not going to go anywhere anyway.
I mean, I'm already stealing your time for what we said. I just want to like finish with one question, if you allow. So, and it will make sense with the question. We gave this name, like, Ideas to Postpone the End of the World, is from this book. It's this like native Brazilian in the Amazon. And what I think is interesting is his reason to postpone the end. That's like, if we postpone the end, we will have like a bit more time to tell one more story. So in this short time we postpone, we can have another story. And what I want to ask, and there's like other questions, but I think they make sense in the end. It's how you see this postponing. Like, how would you try to postpone the end of the world to be able to tell one more story?
It makes me think of how what you said at the beginning. I am an optimist, and I don't recall saying that it couldn't get any worse. But I do think I tend to always think there is room for worse. So that I think that's the optimism. I'm always thinking there is always, unfortunately, room for worse. So that's just trying to take stock of where you're at in the moment and kind of make anything of the moment. Um, I think it's really beautiful the way you frame it with postponing the end of the world and kind of just telling another story, because ultimately that's all there is. That's all you're left with at the end of the day, for all the struggles and work and how much we beat up ourselves over the work and how much we associate ourselves with the work and so on and so forth. I don't know, it still comes down to the simple thing of how the sun hits you in the face at the right hour, or how a breeze comes in and messes up your drawings, or how someone makes you laugh, or it maybe again it sounds like nothing, but I do feel that everything we do should just be an excuse to to work around those moments. Not the other way around.
Yeah, I think we need this optimism in the end. Like, I don't know, I feel like in Brazil we used to be like this, like things, yeah, we can do, we're gonna do something in the future, and then reality like crashed and say, yeah, no, there's no, the only way out is the airport. That's how we say now. But in the end, like, it's our story and nobody wants to talk, like, to be the random guy talking alone in the street. So the more we can share, I think it's more is the better, right? Yeah, I mean, it's time. Thank you very much, Oana. I love it. I know the students also. Thank you a lot. And it was really nice to see you and see you well. And hope you get the vaccines soon. And we can have like this big parties with random crazy people again, which is the most interesting.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And you know, I hear the gravity of the situation, and I can relate to it, not directly, but know how it is to not have any air left in a way. But I think I always return to optimism, and you know, one has to fight for it in a way, because what else is there? The only there is no alternative really to it, right? And sometimes optimism means doing nothing. Sometimes means, you know, refute. It can have many different manifestations. Optimism doesn't necessarily mean dancing on the table, but I don't think there's an alternative to it that is synonymous with life. So
yeah.
I hope to see you all soon somewhere. Thank you for having me and the invitation and the very nice framing. I do need to read the air bubble story now. So bubble.
It's so beautiful. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Obrigado por todo mundo. Tchau.